Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The night everything changed. The sterile hospital lights hummed overhead as Clinton Garrett sat beside his 8-year-old son Jimmy's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of the boy's chest. The machines beeped rhythmically, the only sound breaking the suffocating silence of the pediatric ICU. Jimmy's small face was pale against the white pillows, his body broken for what everyone called an accident. Clinton's weathered hands, scarred from 20 years of construction work, trembled as he brushed a strand of hair from his son's forehead. At 42, Clinton had built an empire from nothing, starting with a single hammer and ending with Garrett Construction, the most respected building company in 3 counties. But all his success meant nothing now. Mr. Garrett? Dr. Patricia Reynolds approached, her expression grave. Clinton had known Patricia since high school. They dated briefly before he met Andrea. Her medical coat couldn't hide the sympathy in her eyes. "I need to speak with you." Clinton stood slowly, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow over the small bed. His steel gray eyes, which had intimidated countless business rivals, now held a father's desperation. "How bad is it, Pat?" She glanced around, ensuring privacy. "The internal bleeding is severe. We've done everything we can, but—" She paused, struggling with the words. "Clinton, I don't think Jimmy will survive the night." "I'm sorry." The words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Clinton's jaw clenched, his hands forming fists. He'd survived poverty, built a fortune, and crushed anyone who stood in his way. But he couldn't fight this. "Where's Andrea?" Dr. Reynolds asked gently. Clinton's expression darkened. His wife of 12 years had been acting strange lately, distant, secretive. When the call came about Jimmy's accident, she'd seemed almost relieved. Then, 2 hours ago, she'd simply vanished. As if summoned by their conversation, Andrea Garrett appeared in the doorway. At 36, she retained the beauty that had first caught Clinton's eye at a community college dance. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless despite the circumstances. She wore an expensive dress, one Clinton didn't remember buying her. "Clinton," she said, her voice oddly flat. "I need to talk to you." Dr. Reynolds excused herself, leaving the couple alone beside their dying son. Andrea didn't even glance at Jimmy as she spoke. "I can't do this anymore," she said, checking her phone. "This whole situation, it's too much." "Situation?" Clinton's voice was dangerously quiet. "Our son is dying, Andrea." She shrugged, the gesture chilling in its callousness. "These things happen. Look, I've already made arrangements with Morrison Funeral Home. Bury him cheaply. I won't be attending." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Clinton stared at his wife, trying to process what he'd just heard. In 12 years of marriage, he'd seen Andrea's selfishness, her materialistic nature, but this— "What did you just say?" Andrea was already backing toward the door. "I'm leaving, Clinton. Don't try to find me. And don't expect me to waste money on an elaborate funeral for a kid who was probably going to amount to nothing anyway." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. Clinton stood frozen, his mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of her betrayal. His wife, the mother of his child, had just abandoned their dying son with instructions to bury him cheaply. Hours later, Clinton sat alone with Jimmy as the boy's breathing grew shallower. The doctors had done what they could. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Clinton held his son's small hand, whispering stories of construction sites and fishing trips they'd taken together. "Dad!" Jimmy's voice was barely a whisper. Clinton leaned closer. "I'm here, buddy. I left something for you. Important." Jimmy's eyes struggled to focus. "My socks. Check my socks." Before Clinton could ask what he meant, Jimmy's eyes closed, and the machines began their final, devastating song. 2 hours later, Clinton sat in the hospital's family room, numb with grief. The funeral director had been contacted, arrangements made. Jimmy's body had been taken away, but not before Clinton had honored his son's final request. Removing Jimmy's small socks in the privacy of the hospital room, Clinton had found something impossible, a small brass key, no bigger than his thumb, taped carefully to the bottom of Jimmy's right foot. With it was a tiny piece of paper with Jimmy's careful 8-year-old handwriting. Use this to unlock what's inside. Now, staring at the key in his palm, Clinton felt the first stirring of something other than grief. Questions. How had Jimmy gotten this key? What did it unlock? And why had his son, in his final moments, made sure Clinton found it? The key was warm from his son's skin, and engraved on one side was a small number, 247. Clinton turned it over and over, his builder's mind analyzing its construction. This wasn't a house key or a car key. This looked like it belonged to a safety deposit box or a locker. As dawn broke over the hospital parking lot, Clinton Garrett sat in his truck, staring at the key that his dying son had somehow hidden from everyone, including the medical staff who'd examined every inch of Jimmy's broken body. The boy had been unconscious since the accident, unable to walk or even move. So how had Jimmy gotten this key? And what had he meant by what's inside? Clinton started his truck, his grief beginning to crystallize into something else entirely. For the first time since the accident, he felt the familiar stirring of his predatory instincts, the same instincts that had built his empire and destroyed his enemies. Someone was going to pay for what happened to Jimmy, and this key was going to show him who. Chapter 2. Unlocking the Truth. 3 days after Jimmy's funeral, a modest affair attended only by Clinton, his foreman Jerry Atkinson, and Dr. Reynolds. Clinton stood in the lobby of First National Bank, the brass key heavy in his pocket. He'd spent sleepless nights visiting every bank, post office, and storage facility in 3 counties, looking for box number 247. Mr. Garrett, the bank manager, Jeffrey Stokes, approached with obvious nervousness. Jeffrey had been at the funeral, one of the few who'd known Jimmy personally. I heard about the key. Box 247 has been paid for through a trust, one set up in Jimmy's name. Clinton's blood chilled. My 8-year-old son set up a trust. No, sir. Someone else did, using Jimmy's name. The account was opened 6 months ago. Jeffrey led Clinton down to the vault, his hands shaking as he inserted his master key alongside Clinton's. Mr. Garrett, whatever's in here, maybe you should have someone with you. Open it. The box slid out with a metallic scrape. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with documents and a small digital camera. Clinton's hands were steady as he opened the envelope, but what he found made his vision blur with rage. Photographs. Dozens of them. Andrea and Wade Knapp, a local real estate developer Clinton had considered a friend, in intimate poses dating back 8 months. But these weren't just affair photos. The timestamps showed something far more sinister. They'd been planning Jimmy's accident. Text message printouts revealed the horrible truth. Wade had been pressuring Andrea to leave Clinton for months, but she'd refused to give up her comfortable lifestyle. The solution they devised was elegant in its cruelty. Remove Jimmy from the equation, inherit Clinton's construction empire through Clinton's grief-induced breakdown or death, then eliminate Clinton himself. The kid's too attached to his daddy, read one of Andrea's messages. Clinton would never abandon him. We need a permanent solution. Wade's response chilled Clinton's blood. My guy can make it look like an accident. Brake failure on that steep hill by the quarry. Kid walks to school that way every day. The final document was a life insurance policy on Jimmy, one Clinton had never seen before. Andrea had taken out 6 months ago, naming herself as the sole beneficiary. $2 million. Clinton's hands crumpled the papers as the full scope of their betrayal became clear. Andrea and Wade hadn't just planned to kill Jimmy. They'd plotted to murder Clinton too, making it look like a grief-stricken suicide after losing his son. The life insurance money would fund their new life together. But how had Jimmy known? How had an 8-year-old boy discovered his mother's plan to murder him? The digital camera held the answer. Clinton scrolled through dozens of photos Jimmy had taken in secret. Images of his mother and Wade together, screenshots of text messages Jimmy had photographed from Andrea's phone, even audio recordings the clever boy had made using the camera's voice memo function. The final recording was time-stamped 2 days before the accident. Jimmy's small voice whispered into the camera, "Mom and Uncle Wade are going to hurt me. They think I don't know, but I heard them. Mom said she need me gone so she can have all of Daddy's money. If something happens to me, Daddy, use this to make them pay. I love you." Clinton's vision turned red. His son, his brilliant, brave son, had known he was going to die and had spent his final days gathering evidence to protect his father. Jimmy had somehow managed to hide the key and the safety deposit box from everyone, even while knowing his mother planned to murder him. The boy had died not just protecting Clinton, but arming him for war. Clinton carefully photographed every document with his phone, then sealed the originals back in the safety deposit box. He learned long ago that evidence was worthless if it could be destroyed. But more importantly, he learned that the best revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about making the guilty destroy themselves. Leaving the bank, Clinton drove to the construction site where Jerry Atkinson was overseeing a new apartment complex. Jerry had been with Garrett Construction for 15 years, a former Marine who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home to build instead of destroy. "Boss," Jerry approached, concern etched on his weathered face. "How you holding up?" Clinton handed Jerry the phone, letting him scroll through the evidence. Jerry's expression grew darker with each image, his military bearing returning as he processed what he was seeing. "Jesus Christ, Clinton. They killed Jimmy for insurance money. Worse than that." Clinton's voice was deadly calm. "They plan to kill me too. Make it look like suicide from grief." Jerry handed back the phone, his jaw set. "What do you need me to do?" "I need to know everything about Wade Knapp. Everything. His business, his family, his weaknesses. And I need to know where Andrea is hiding." Jerry nodded. "I've got contacts from the Corps. They can find anyone, dig up anything." "Good. But Jerry," Clinton's gray eyes were like winter steel. "This doesn't end with exposing them. This doesn't end with prison or lawsuits. They murder my son. They're going to pay in ways that'll make them beg for death." That evening, Clinton sat in Jimmy's room, surrounded by his son's drawings and school projects. On the desk was Jimmy's latest art assignment, a family portrait showing Clinton and Jimmy fishing together. Andrea was nowhere in the picture. Even in his child's art, Jimmy had known the truth about his mother. Clinton opened his laptop and began researching Wade Knapp's business empire. Wade owned 3 apartment complexes, a small shopping center, and had been aggressively expanding his real estate holdings. More importantly, Wade was leveraged to the hilt, owing money to some very unpleasant people. A plan began forming in Clinton's mind, not just for revenge, but for complete and utter destruction. Andrea and Wade had killed Jimmy for money and freedom. Clinton would take both from them, piece by piece, until they had nothing left but the knowledge of what they'd done. And then he'd take their lives, just as they'd taken his son's. His phone rang. Jerry's name appeared on the screen. "Found them," Jerry said without preamble. "Wade's at a lake house about 2 hours north. Neighbors say a redhead moved in last week. Expensive car in the driveway. Lights on every night." Clinton smiled for the first time since Jimmy's death. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Perfect. Tomorrow, we start making them pay." Chapter 3, Building the Trap. Clinton spent the next morning in his office, but not conducting business as usual. Instead, he was orchestrating the systematic destruction of 2 people who believed they were clever enough to murder a child and get away with it. His first call was to Marcus Reed, a private investigator who'd worked several insurance fraud cases for Garrett Construction. Marcus was expensive, discreet, and most importantly, had contacts in some very dark places. "I need everything on Wade Knapp," Clinton told him. "Financial records, business dealings, personal habits, enemies. Everything. How deep you want me to dig?" "All the way to China." "And Marcus?" "I need to know who he owes money to. The kind of people who don't accept late payments." His second call was to Saul Perez, a lawyer who specialized in the kinds of legal problems that traditional attorneys wouldn't touch. Saul had helped Clinton navigate some gray areas in the construction business over the years, and he understood that sometimes justice required creativity. "I need Wade Knapp's business holdings tied up in legal knots," Clinton explained. "Environmental violations, permit issues, building code problems. I don't care what you have to file or who you have to pay off. I want his cash flow strangled." By noon, Clinton had set a dozen wheels in motion. But the call that mattered most came at 1:47 p.m. Boss. Jerry's voice was tight with excitement. You need to see this. Clinton drove to Jerry's apartment, a modest place that reflected the foreman's practical nature. Jerry had been busy since their conversation, using his military connections to dig into Wade Knapp's background. Wade's got problems, Jerry said, spreading photographs across his kitchen table. Big ones. He owes $800,000 to some casino interests in Atlantic City. The kind that break legs first and ask questions later. The photos showed Wade meeting with two men in expensive suits outside a restaurant. Even from a distance, their body language screamed danger. Vincent Caruso and his nephew Tony, Jerry continued. They run book for the Torino family. Wade's been making payments, but barely. Word is he's got maybe 2 weeks before they decide he's more valuable as an example than as a debtor. Clinton studied the photographs, his builder's mind seeing the foundation of Wade's destruction. What else? Andrea is spending money like water. Expensive clothes, jewelry, spa treatments. She's burning through cash faster than Wade can steal it. And get this, she's been calling her sister in Miami, talking about starting over somewhere warm. She's planning to run. Gets better. Wade doesn't know. He thinks they're building a life together here. But Andrea is already looking at one-way plane tickets. Clinton felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. Andrea and Wade's greed would be their downfall, but not before he helped things along. I need you to make contact with these casino people, Clinton said. Let them know Wade's come into some money recently. Insurance money. Maybe suggest they ask him about it. Jerry grinned wolfishly. You want them to squeeze him? I want them to break him. But not yet. First, we're going to have some fun. That afternoon, Clinton drove to Knapp Developments, Wade's real estate office in a converted Victorian mansion downtown. Wade's secretary, a young woman named Melanie North, looked nervous as Clinton entered. Mr. Garrett, she stammered. I'm so sorry about Jimmy. Mr. Knapp said to tell you he's not available today. Clinton smiled pleasantly. That's fine, Melanie. I'm not here to see Wade. I'm here to see you. Melanie's confusion was obvious. Clinton had always been polite during business dealings, but there was something different about him now, something that made her instinctively step back. I understand you've been helping Wade with some special projects lately, Clinton continued. Paperwork that required discretion. Melanie's face went pale. Clinton knew from Marcus Reed's preliminary report that she'd been the one to help Wade set up the fake trust fund for Jimmy's safety deposit box. She probably thought it was some kind of surprise gift. I don't know what you mean. Clinton placed a manila envelope on her desk. These are photos of you notarizing documents for a trust fund in my dead son's name. Documents you never reported to the proper authorities. Melanie opened the envelope with shaking hands. The photos were clear. Marcus Reed was very good at his job. I can have you arrested for fraud, Clinton said conversationally. Falsifying legal documents involving a minor. That's a felony, Melanie. Or what? Or you can help me with a project. Something that will ensure Wade Knapp gets exactly what he deserves. Melanie stared at the photos, her career and freedom hanging in the balance. What kind of project? Clinton leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. The kind where you keep your job, your freedom, and your conscience clean. All you have to do is make sure Wade receives certain phone calls and documents over the next few days. Can you do that? Melanie nodded frantically. She was young, scared, and had no idea she'd been helping a murderer. Clinton felt no guilt about using her fear. She'd unwittingly helped kill Jimmy, and now she'd help avenge him. Good. Tomorrow morning, you're going to receive a package. Inside will be photocopies of insurance documents and a phone number. You'll tell Wade that an insurance investigator called asking about Jimmy's policy. The investigator wants to meet with him personally. But there's no insurance investigator, is there? Clinton's smile was arctic. No, Melanie, there isn't. That evening, Clinton sat in his truck across from Wade's lake house, watching through binoculars as Wade and Andrea played house. They were grilling steaks on the deck, Andrea wearing a dress that cost more than most people made in a month. They looked happy, carefree, like a couple celebrating their good fortune. They had no idea their world was about to collapse. Clinton's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Reed. Wade's been skimming from his rental properties, to pay the casino debt. Property management company is already suspicious. One phone call from the right person and they'll audit everything. Another text from Saul Perez. Filed environmental violation reports on all 3 of Wade's apartment complexes. Health Department is scheduling surprise inspections tomorrow. Also triggered IRS audit based on anonymous tip about unreported rental income. The trap was set. Over the next week, Wade would face challenges from every direction: legal, financial, and personal. The pressure would build until he made a mistake, and when he did, Clinton would be waiting. But the real beauty of Clinton's plan wasn't just Wade's destruction. It was the fact that Andrea and Wade would turn on each other when the pressure mounted. Their greed and selfishness, the very traits that had led them to murder Jimmy, would become the weapons Clinton used to destroy them. As Clinton drove home, he passed the hill where Jimmy's accident had occurred. Someone had left flowers by the guardrail. Clinton stopped and added his own, a small construction toy truck, the kind Jimmy had loved to play with. "Almost time, buddy," he whispered. "Daddy's going to make them pay for what they did to you." The wind picked up, rustling the flowers, and for a moment Clinton could swear he heard his son's voice in the breeze. "I love you, Daddy. Make them hurt." Clinton smiled grimly. He made a lot of promises in his life, but this was one he intended to keep. Chapter 4. The Pressure Builds. Wade Knapp's world began crumbling at exactly 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. He was sitting in his office, sipping coffee and reviewing rental income reports, when Melanie burst through his door without knocking. "Mr. Knapp, there's a problem," she said, her voice shaking. "The health department is here. They want to inspect all 3 apartment complexes. They said it's an emergency investigation based on anonymous complaints about code violations." Wade's coffee mug hit the floor, shattering into pieces. "What kind of complaints?" "Mold, faulty wiring, inadequate heating systems. They have warrants." Before Wade could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed the property management company that handled his rental collections. "Wade, we need to talk," came the voice of Patricia Manning, the company's chief financial officer. "There are discrepancies in your accounts. Significant ones." Wade's hand tightened on the phone. Over the past 8 months, he'd been skimming rental payments to cover his gambling debts and fund his lifestyle with Andrea. He'd been careful, taking small amounts from different properties, but apparently not careful enough. "I can explain. The police are on their way to your office," Patricia interrupted. "Don't leave town." The line went dead. Wade stared at his phone, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not now, when he and Andrea were so close to starting their new life together. His phone rang again. This time, the number was unfamiliar. "Wade Knapp." The voice was gravelly, with a distinct Brooklyn accent. "Yeah, who's this?" "Vincent Caruso. I think you know why I'm calling." Wade's blood turned to ice. Vincent Caruso was the casino enforcer he'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. Their last conversation had ended with Vincent promising to visit Wade if the next payment was late. "Vincent, I can explain. I've got the money. You better. All of it. 800 grand, plus the 20% interest we discussed. You got 48 hours. 48 hours? That's impossible. Then you better get creative. Because after 48 hours, my nephew Tony starts paying visits to people you care about. Starting with that redhead you've been shacking up with." The line went dead, leaving Wade staring at his phone in horror. In the span of 10 minutes, his entire world had collapsed. The health department was shutting down his properties, the police were investigating his finances, and the mob was threatening to kill Andrea. Wade grabbed his car keys and raced toward the lake house. He had to warn Andrea, had to figure out how they were going to get out of this mess. But as he drove, his phone kept ringing. The IRS, his insurance company, the Environmental Protection Agency. It was like everyone had decided to investigate Wade Knapp on the same day. Meanwhile, Clinton Garrett sat in his office, fielding updates from his team with grim satisfaction. Marcus Reed called first. "The health department found exactly what we planted," Marcus reported. "Mold samples in the ventilation systems, faulty wiring in the utility rooms, documentation of inadequate heating repairs. Wade's apartment complexes will be condemned by Friday." Jerry called 20 minutes later. "Vincent Caruso is pissed. His boy Tony just drove by Wade's office twice. They're not playing around. Saul Perez delivered the best news of all. The IRS audit turned up a gold mine. Wade's been underreporting rental income for 3 years. They're freezing his accounts pending investigation. He won't be able to access a dime. Clinton allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before making his next call. He dialed the lake house, knowing Wade would be racing there in a panic. Andrea answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful and unsuspecting. "Hello, Andrea, it's Clinton." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Andrea finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "Clinton, I didn't expect to hear from you. I imagine not, especially since you've been so busy lately. New house, new lifestyle, new boyfriend." Another pause. "I don't know what you're talking about." Clinton's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. "I'm talking about Wade Knapp, Andrea. I'm talking about the insurance policy you took out on our son. I'm talking about the text messages planning Jimmy's murder." The phone slipped from Andrea's hand, clattering to the floor. When she picked it up, Clinton could hear her breathing heavily. "You don't have any proof of anything," she whispered. "Actually, I have quite a bit of proof. Jimmy made sure of that before you killed him. Jimmy was 8 years old. He didn't know anything. Our son was brilliant, Andrea. Much smarter than you gave him credit for. He knew you were planning to murder him, and he spent his last days making sure you'd pay for it." Andrea's voice cracked. "You're lying. Safety deposit box 247 at First National Bank. Your loving son left me quite a collection of evidence. Photos, text messages, audio recordings. Everything I need to put you and Wade on death row." The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted their conversation. Through the lake house windows, Andrea could see Wade's BMW speeding up the gravel drive, dust clouds billowing behind it. "Looks like Wade's coming home," Clinton observed, though he was miles away. "You might want to ask him about his conversation with Vincent Caruso, or the police investigation into his embezzlement, or the IRS audit. It's been quite a day for your boyfriend." The line went dead just as Wade burst through the front door, his face pale and his clothes disheveled. "Andrea, we have to leave. Now, pack everything. We're getting out of here tonight." Andrea stared at him, Clinton's words echoing in her mind. "What happened?" "Everything's falling apart. The cops, the IRS, the health department. Someone's orchestrating this, making it all happen at once." "Clinton knows," Andrea whispered. "He called. He knows about Jimmy, about us, about everything." Wade's knees buckled. He collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. "We're dead. Vincent Caruso wants 800 grand in 2 days, or he kills us both. The cops want me for embezzlement. And if Clinton has evidence about Jimmy, we run," Andrea said, her voice gaining strength. "Tonight, we take what cash we have and disappear." "With what money?" Wade laughed bitterly. "My accounts are frozen. The properties are condemned. About maybe 5,000 in cash, and that won't get us out of the state, let alone the country." Andrea walked to the window, staring out at the lake. In the distance, she could see a lone fisherman in a small boat, too far away to make out clearly. Something about the figure seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. "There has to be something we can do," she said. "Some way to fix this." Wade stood up, pacing frantically. "The only thing that would save us is if Clinton dies before he can give that evidence to the police. But we already tried that once, and look how it turned out. Maybe we don't have to kill him," Andrea said slowly. "Maybe we just have to convince him to keep quiet." "Ow!" Andrea turned from the window, her expression calculating. "Clinton loved Jimmy more than anything. What if we told him we could bring Jimmy back?" Wade stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "There's a doctor in Switzerland. Experimental procedures. If we could convince Clinton that Jimmy's death wasn't permanent, that there was a chance to save him." "You're insane. Jimmy's dead. We made sure of that." "But Clinton doesn't know how much we know about medicine," Andrea continued, her voice growing excited. "We could create fake documents, forge medical reports, make him believe there's hope." Wade shook his head. "It'll never work. Clinton's too smart for that. Clinton's grieving. Grieving people believe what they want to believe." As they talked, neither of them noticed the fishermen on the lake had moved closer to shore. If they had looked carefully, They might have recognized Clinton Garrett, sitting patiently in his small boat, listening to every word through the long-range listening device pointed at their window. Clinton smiled grimly as he recorded their conversation. They were planning another deception, another manipulation. But this time, he'd be ready for them. This time, they'd walk straight into his trap. Chapter 5. The Net Closes. The next morning, Clinton sat in his office reviewing the audio recording from the lake house when Jerry knocked on his door. "Boss, we got company," Jerry said, stepping aside to reveal Vincent Caruso and his nephew Tony. Vincent was exactly what Clinton had expected. A man in his 50s with silver hair, expensive clothes, and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of violence. Tony was younger, broader, with the look of someone who enjoyed his work a little too much. "Mr. Garrett," Vincent said, settling into the chair across from Clinton's desk. "I understand you, and I have a mutual interest in Wade Knapp." Clinton leaned back in his chair, studying the two men. "What kind of interest?" "The kind where he owes me $800,000, and you want him to suffer for personal reasons." Vincent's smile was razor thin. "My sources tell me you've been pressuring Mr. Knapp lately." "Your sources are well-informed." Tony spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. "We heard about your kid. That's rough. You want revenge. We want our money. Maybe we can help each other." Clinton had been expecting this conversation. When you stirred up someone's life the way he'd been stirring up Wade's, other interested parties inevitably noticed. "What are you proposing?" Vincent pulled out a manila folder, spreading photographs across Clinton's desk. They showed Wade and Andrea at the lake house, shopping, dining out. The surveillance was professional quality. "Wade thinks he's going to run," Vincent said. "Pack up his girlfriend and disappear. But running requires money, and thanks to your efforts, Wade's broke. So desperate people do desperate things. Wade's going to try something stupid to get money fast. When he does, we want to be there." Clinton studied the photographs, his mind working. "What do you want from me?" "Information. You seem to know Wade's moves before he makes them. We want to know when and where he's going to surface next." Tony leaned forward. "Plus, we heard you got evidence about your kid's death. Evidence that could put Wade away forever." "I might. We don't want Wade in prison," Vincent said bluntly. "We want him alive and paying what he owes. But if you're planning to kill him..." He shrugged. "We want our money first." Clinton made a decision that would have surprised his old self, the man he'd been before Jimmy's murder. "I'm not planning to kill Wade." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm planning to destroy him. Completely. Take everything he values, everyone he loves, every hope he has for the future. Death would be mercy." Tony laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "I like this guy. Here's what I propose," Clinton continued. "You get your money. I get my revenge. But we do it my way." Vincent considered this. "What's your way?" Clinton pulled out his phone, playing the audio recording from the lake house. Vincent and Tony listened to Andrea and Wade's plan to deceive Clinton about Jimmy's death, their voices growing darker with each word. "They're planning to manipulate a grieving father," Vincent said when the recording ended. "That's low, even for scumbags like them." "Which is why they're going to walk right into our trap," Clinton replied. "Wade needs money. You want your money. I want them to suffer. So we're going to give Wade a chance to get money, a chance that will destroy them both." Clinton outlined his plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and brutal in its efficiency. Vincent and Tony would offer Wade a job, something that seemed like easy money but was actually a setup. Wade would jump at the opportunity, desperate to solve his financial problems. But the job would require him to betray Andrea, and Andrea's reaction would provide Clinton with the final piece of evidence he needed. "You want us to turn them against each other," Vincent said admiringly. "Beautiful. More than that, I want them to destroy each other. And when they're done, you get your money, Wade learns what real suffering feels like, and Andrea pays for murdering my son." That afternoon, Wade received a phone call that seemed like a gift from heaven. The caller identified himself as Marcus Torino, Vincent Caruso's cousin, with a business proposition. "I hear you're having some cash flow problems," Marcus said. "I might have a solution." They met at a restaurant downtown, far from Wade's usual haunts. Marcus was a thin man with nervous energy and the kind of expensive watch that suggested serious money. I need someone to transport some merchandise, Marcus explained. Nothing dangerous, just some items that need to move from point A to point B without attracting attention. One job, 50,000 cash. Wade's desperation made him ignore the obvious red flags. What kind of merchandise? The kind you don't ask questions about. You pick up a package in Philadelphia, drive it to Richmond, hand it over. 8 hours work, 50 grand. When? Tomorrow night. But there's a condition. Marcus leaned forward. You go alone. No girlfriends, no partners, no backup. This is a one-man job. Wade's mind raced. 50,000 would buy them time, maybe enough to disappear before Vincent Caruso's deadline expired. And it was just one drive, one night. I'll do it. Marcus smiled. Good. I'll call you tomorrow with the details. As Wade drove back to the lake house, he felt hope for the first time in days. Andrea would be thrilled. They could take the money and run, start over somewhere Vincent Caruso would never find them. But when he arrived at the lake house, Andrea was packing frantically. We have to leave tonight, she said without preamble. I've been thinking about what Clinton said. He has evidence, real evidence. We can't wait. I might have a solution, Wade said, explaining the job offer. Andrea stopped packing, her expression suspicious. 50,000 for one drive? Wade, that's obviously illegal. So what? We're already in deep trouble. What's one more crime? What if it's a setup? What if Clinton's behind this? Wade hadn't considered that possibility, but Andrea's paranoia was contagious. You think he'd work with the mob? I think he'd work with the devil himself to get revenge for Jimmy. They argued for hours, their stress and fear turning them against each other. Andrea insisted they flee immediately with what little money they had. Wade argued that 50,000 would give them real options, a real chance to escape. Fine, Andrea finally said. Take your mobster job, but I'm not waiting around to see if it's a trap. What are you talking about? I'm leaving tonight, with or without you. Wade stared at her, seeing his future crumbling. You're abandoning me? I'm saving myself. Something you should have thought about before you borrowed money from killers. Neither of them noticed the small electronic device that had been planted in their living room during their argument, or the fact that every word was being transmitted to a receiver in Clinton Garrett's truck, parked a half-mile away. Clinton listened to their fight with cold satisfaction. The pressure was working exactly as he'd planned. Wade and Andrea were turning on each other, their selfishness and greed poisoning the relationship they'd murdered Jimmy to protect. Tomorrow night, Wade would drive to Philadelphia to pick up a package that didn't exist, walking into a trap that would finish him forever. And Andrea would run, thinking she was escaping, only to find that Clinton had planned for that possibility too. Phase 1 of their destruction was complete. Now came the real pain. Chapter 6, The Breaking Point. Wade drove toward Philadelphia the next evening with $50,000 dancing in his mind and dread growing in his stomach. Andrea had left that morning without a goodbye, taking her expensive clothes and jewelry, but leaving behind any pretense of love or loyalty. The meeting point was a warehouse in North Philadelphia, the kind of industrial wasteland where bad things happen to naive people. Wade's hands shook as he pulled into the empty parking lot, his headlights cutting through the darkness. A man emerged from the shadows. Not Marcus Torino, but Tony Caruso. Wade's blood turned to ice as he recognized Vincent's nephew. Get out of the car, Wade. Wade considered running, but Tony's hand rested casually on his jacket, where the outline of a gun was visible. Wade climbed out slowly, his legs unsteady. Where's Marcus? He's supposed to give me the package. Tony laughed. There is no package, you idiot. And there is no Marcus Torino. You just drove 3 hours to your own execution. More men emerged from the warehouse. 4 of them, all with the predatory look of career criminals. Wade was surrounded, alone, and completely helpless. Wait, Wade stammered. I can get you money. All of it. Just give me more time. Time's up, Tony said. But before we end this, my uncle wants to have a conversation with you. Vincent Caruso stepped out of a black sedan, his expression calm, but his eyes promising violence. Wade, you look terrible. Vincent, please. I can explain everything. I'm sure you can. But first, I want you to understand something. Vincent nodded toward the warehouse. Your girlfriend isn't as smart as she thinks she is. Two more men emerged from the building, dragging a struggling figure between them. Andrea, her expensive clothes torn and her perfect makeup smeared with tears. "Wade," she screamed. "Help me." Wade's world tilted. "How did you—" "She left this morning. We've been watching both of you for days," Vincent explained conversationally. "When Andrea tried to run, we were ready. Picked her up at the airport trying to board a plane to Miami." Tony grinned. She had a suitcase full of jewelry and about 30 grand in cash. Nice little nest egg she was planning to start over with. Wade stared at Andrea, understanding flooding through him. "You were leaving me. Permanently." "Wait, no. I was going to send for you once it was safe." "Bullshit." Wade's grief and fear crystallized into rage. "You were going to disappear and leave me to die." Vincent watched their confrontation with professional interest. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. Desperate people turning on each other, making mistakes that could be exploited. "Here's what's going to happen," Vincent announced. "You two are going to settle your debts. All of them. To me, and to someone else who has an interest in your situation." A new vehicle pulled into the parking lot, Clinton Garrett's pickup truck. Wade and Andrea watched in horror as Clinton climbed out, carrying a manila folder and wearing an expression that promised terrible things. "Clinton," Andrea whispered, "how did you find you? I never lost you." Clinton's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I've been watching every move you've made since the day you abandoned our dying son." Vincent stepped back, giving Clinton space. This had been their deal. Vincent would corner Wade and Andrea, and Clinton would have his confrontation. "You killed Jimmy for insurance money," Clinton continued, opening the folder. $2 million that you thought would fund your new life together. But you made one mistake. "What mistake?" Wade demanded. Clinton smiled coldly. "You underestimated my son. Jimmy knew what you were planning. He spent his last days gathering evidence against you." Clinton pulled out photographs, audio transcripts, insurance documents. Every text message planning his murder. Every meeting you had. Every cruel thing you said about a child you were planning to kill. Andrea's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees in the gravel, sobbing. "We didn't mean for it to happen like that." "You meant for it to happen exactly like that," Clinton replied. "You researched the best way to kill a child and make it look accidental. You took out an insurance policy on his life. You planned to murder me after my grief made me convenient to eliminate." Wade backed away, but Tony's men blocked his escape. "Clinton, we can work something out. The insurance money has been donated to a children's hospital in Jimmy's name," Clinton interrupted. "Every penny. You killed my son for nothing." Vincent cleared his throat. "Speaking of money, Wade still owes me $800,000, plus interest." Clinton reached into his jacket, pulling out a cashier's check. "Wade's debt to you is now paid in full." Vincent examined the check, his eyebrows rising. "This is for $1.2 million. The extra is for your patience and cooperation." Wade stared in shock. "You paid my debt? Why?" Clinton's smile was arctic. "Because I don't want you dead quickly. I want you alive to suffer for what you did to Jimmy." Vincent pocketed the check. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Garrett. Wade, Andrea, consider yourselves very lucky. And very stupid." Vincent and his men climbed into their vehicles and drove away, leaving Wade and Andrea alone with Clinton in the empty lot. The silence stretched for long minutes, broken only by Andrea's sobbing. "What happens now?" Wade finally asked. "Now you learn what it feels like to lose everything," Clinton replied. "Your business is destroyed. Your properties are condemned. Your girlfriend tried to abandon you. Your reputation is ruined. The police are investigating your embezzlement. The IRS has frozen your assets." "But," Vincent said, "Vincent got his money. You get to live with the knowledge that you murdered an innocent child and gained nothing from it. No money, no freedom, no love, no future." Clinton walked back toward his truck, then paused. "Oh, and Wade? The police will receive copies of Jimmy's evidence tomorrow morning. Andrea's too. You'll both be arrested for first-degree murder." Andrea looked up from the gravel, her makeup completely destroyed. "Clinton, please. We can make this right somehow." "Make it right." Clinton's voice dropped to a whisper. "You want to make murdering my son right? We We could do charity work. Help other children. Show that we're sorry. Clinton stared at her for a long moment, and for just an instant, Andrea thought she saw a flicker of something other than hatred in his eyes. Then he spoke, and any hope she might have felt died instantly. Jimmy left me one more message, Andrea. Want to hear it? Without waiting for an answer, Clinton pulled out his phone and played an audio file. Jimmy's young voice filled the night air. Daddy, if something happens to me, don't forgive them. They're going to say they're sorry, but they're not. They're just sorry they got caught. Make them pay for what they did. Make them hurt like they hurt us. I love you, Daddy. Get them. The recording ended. Andrea and Wade stared at Clinton, finally understanding that there would be no mercy, no forgiveness, no second chances. Tomorrow, you'll be arrested, Clinton said. You'll spend the rest of your lives in prison, assuming you survive that long. Child killers don't do well in general population. Clinton climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving Wade and Andrea stranded in the dark parking lot with no money, no transportation, and no hope. Their nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Hammer Falls. The arrest came at dawn, exactly as Clinton had promised. Wade was taken from a cheap motel room where he'd spent the night, while Andrea was found sleeping in her car outside a gas station, having nowhere else to go after their confrontation in the parking lot. The media coverage was immediate and brutal. Local mother and lover charged Ian's son's murder screamed the headlines, accompanied by photos of Jimmy smiling at a school event and crime scene photos from the accident that investigators now revealed had been carefully orchestrated. Clinton watched the news coverage from his office, Jerry beside him with a cup of coffee and a satisfied expression. DA says they're going for the death penalty, Jerry reported. Both of them. Evidence is overwhelming. Good. Clinton's voice was flat, emotionless. The rage that had sustained him through weeks of planning had crystallized into cold satisfaction. His phone rang. The caller ID showed the number for the county jail. Mr. Garrett? The voice was broken, desperate. It's Andrea. They let me make one phone call, and I had to try. What do you want, Andrea? Clinton, please. I know you hate me, and you have every right to, but I'm begging you. There has to be some way we can work this out. Clinton leaned back in his chair, considering. Work what out? I'll confess. I'll tell them everything, take full responsibility. I'll say Wade didn't know anything about the plan. Just, please don't let them execute me. Why would I care if they execute you? Because I know you're not a killer. You're angry, and you should be, but you're not like us. You wouldn't really want someone to die. Clinton was quiet for so long that Andrea thought the call had been disconnected. Andrea, he finally said, you kill my son. You murdered an 8-year-old boy for money. You told me to bury him cheaply and walked away while he was dying. I know, and I'm not finished. Clinton's voice cut through her words like a blade. You want to know what kind of man I am? I'm the kind who spent 3 weeks systematically destroying your life and your boyfriend's life before having you arrested. I'm the kind who paid off your mob debt just to keep you alive long enough to suffer properly. What are you saying? I'm saying that when they strap you to that execution table, I'll be in the front row. And when they ask if you have any last words, I hope you remember Jimmy's face. The line went dead. Andrea stared at the phone, finally understanding the complete hopelessness of her situation. But Clinton wasn't finished with his revenge. That afternoon, he received a visitor he'd been expecting, Andrea's sister, Rochelle Levy, who'd driven up from Miami after hearing about the arrests. Rochelle was younger than Andrea, with the same auburn hair, but none of the hardness that had developed in her sister over the years. She sat across from Clinton in his office, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Garrett, I'm so sorry about Jimmy. I love that little boy like he was my own nephew. Clinton studied her, seeing genuine grief in her eyes. What do you want, Rochelle? I want to understand how my sister could do something so horrible. Andrea wasn't always like this. She used to be kind, caring. Something changed her. Greed changed her. Maybe, but there's something else. Rochelle hesitated, then pulled out a manila envelope. I found this in Andrea's apartment in Miami. She'd been planning to move down there permanently. Clinton opened the envelope, finding documents that made his blood run cold. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, prescription receipts. Andrea had been seeing a therapist for months, complaining of intrusive thoughts about harming her family. She's been planning this for almost a year, Rochelle whispered. The therapist's notes mention her talking about removing obstacles to her happiness. Clinton read through the documents, his anger reaching new heights. Andrea hadn't just decided to kill Jimmy on impulse. She'd been fantasizing about murdering her own son for months. Why are you showing me this? Because I think there's more. I think Andrea might have. Rochelle's voice broke. I think she might have hurt other children. The implications hit Clinton like a physical blow. What other children? Andrea worked at a daycare center before she married you. 3 children died of accidents during the year she was there. The center was shut down, but no charges were ever filed. Clinton stared at the documents, pieces of a horrible puzzle falling into place. Jimmy hadn't been Andrea's first victim. He'd been a final step in a pattern of child murder that had gone undetected for years. I need copies of everything you have, Clinton said. Of course. But Mr. Garrett, what are you going to do with this information? Clinton's smile was terrible to behold. I'm going to make sure Andrea pays for every child she's ever hurt. That evening, Clinton met with the district attorney, providing the new evidence that transformed the case from a single murder charge to a potential serial killing investigation. The DA's office immediately began reviewing the deaths at the daycare center, and by morning, Andrea faced additional charges in the deaths of 3 more children. Wade, meanwhile, had been abandoned by his legal team when it became clear he couldn't pay their fees. Sitting in his jail cell, he'd had time to think about the complete destruction of his life. The man who'd once owned properties worth millions was now facing execution for a crime that had gained him nothing. His cellmate, a career criminal named Buddy Blake, was amused by Wade's situation. You killed a kid for money and didn't even get the money? Buddy laughed. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. I didn't know it would end like this, Wade protested. Of course you didn't. You're not a real criminal, just a stupid rich boy who thought he was smarter than everybody else. Wade's lawyer, overworked public defender named Jeffrey Stokes, visited him that afternoon with more bad news. The prosecution is offering a deal, Jeffrey said. Life without parole if you testify against Andrea. What kind of testimony? They want you to confirm that she was the mastermind, that she planned everything and manipulated you into going along with it. Wade considered this. Life in prison was better than execution, and Andrea had tried to abandon him anyway. What happens to her if I testify? She gets the death penalty for sure. Multiple counts of first-degree murder. Wade thought about Andrea's plan to run away to Miami, leaving him to face Vincent Caruso's wrath alone. He thought about her cold instructions to bury Jimmy cheaply. He thought about the years he'd wasted loving someone who'd never loved him back. I'll do it, he said. When Andrea learned of Wade's betrayal, she screamed so loudly that guards had to sedate her. Her own lawyer tried to negotiate a similar deal, but the prosecution wasn't interested. Andrea was the mastermind, the serial killer, the monster who'd murdered children for money and convenience. Clinton received updates on both cases from the DA's office, watching as his careful planning brought about the complete destruction of the people who'd killed his son. But even as justice moved forward, he found no satisfaction in their suffering. Nothing would bring Jimmy back. Nothing would undo the pain of losing his child. But at least the world would know that killing Jimmy Garrett had been the worst mistake Andrea and Wade could have made. Their punishment was just beginning. Chapter 8. No Mercy. 3 months later, Clinton sat in the courthouse as Wade Knapp took the witness stand to testify against Andrea. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case, but Wade's testimony would seal Andrea's fate. Wade looked broken. Prison had not been kind to him. His expensive clothes replaced with an orange jumpsuit, his confident demeanor replaced with the haunted look of a man who'd lost everything. He avoided looking at Andrea as he was sworn in. Mr. Knapp, the prosecutor began, please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant. Wade's voice was barely audible. Andrea and I were involved romantically for about 8 months before Jimmy's death. And during this relationship, did Mrs. Garrett ever discuss her feelings about her son? Wade glanced at Clinton, then quickly looked away. She said Jimmy was an obstacle. that Clinton would never leave him or let her take him away from his father. Did she suggest a solution to this problem? She said, Wade's voice broke. She said the only way we could be together was if Jimmy was gone permanently. Andrea's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Wade continued his devastating testimony, describing in detail how Andrea had researched ways to kill children, how she'd taken out the insurance policy, how she'd planned Clinton's death as well. She told me Clinton was weak, Wade said, that he'd probably kill himself from grief after losing Jimmy, making everything easier for us. Clinton listened to every word, his face impassive. But inside, his rage burned hotter with each revelation of Andrea's calculated cruelty. When the defense cross-examined Wade, they tried to paint him as the mastermind, manipulating Andrea's emotions for his own gain. But Wade's complete breakdown on the stand made it clear he was a weak man who'd been dominated by a predator. I know I deserve to die for what I did, Wade sobbed during redirect examination. But Andrea, she's not human. She planned to kill a child like other people plan a vacation. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Jimmy's hidden recordings, the insurance documents, the daycare center deaths, Wade's testimony. But the most damning evidence came from Andrea herself. Against her lawyer's advice, Andrea had insisted on testifying in her own defense. She took the stand wearing a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, tried to project innocence and remorse. It was a catastrophic mistake. Mrs. Garrett, the prosecutor asked, "Do you love your son?" "Of course I loved Jimmy," Andrea replied, her voice carefully modulated. "Then why did you refer to burying him cheaply?" Andrea's composure cracked slightly. "I was in shock. People say things they don't mean when they're grieving." "Were you grieving, Mrs. Garrett? Or were you relieved?" "Objection. Sustained." The prosecutor shifted tactics. "Mrs. Garrett, how do you explain the insurance policy you took out on Jimmy's life?" "I was thinking about his future. College, medical emergencies. A $2 million policy on an 8-year-old. I wanted him protected." "Protected from what?" "The accident you were planning." "That's not. I never." The prosecutor played one of Jimmy's secret recordings. Andrea's voice filled the courtroom. "The kid's too attached to his daddy. Clinton would never abandon him. We need a permanent solution." Andrea stared at the speaker as her own words condemned her. She'd forgotten about that conversation, forgotten that Jimmy might have been listening. "That's taken out of context," she said weakly. "What context makes planning a child's murder acceptable, Mrs. Garrett?" Andrea's careful facade crumbled. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Wade was pushing me, threatening to leave if I didn't do something about Jimmy. So you decided to murder your son? It wasn't supposed to happen like that. The accident was supposed to be quick, painless." The courtroom erupted. Andrea's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Andrea herself seemed to realize what she'd just admitted, her hand flying to her mouth. "You're confirming that you planned Jimmy's death?" the prosecutor pressed. "No. I mean, it wasn't murder. It was meant to look like an accident." "Because murder and accidental death are different things, Mrs. Garrett." Andrea broke down completely, sobbing and babbling about pressure and fear and Wade's manipulation. But her words only dug her grave deeper. Clinton watched his wife's complete destruction with cold satisfaction. This was what justice looked like, not just punishment, but the complete exposure of evil for what it was. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Jimmy Garrett. First-degree murder of 3 children at the daycare center. Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud. The penalty phase was even shorter. Andrea's death sentence was unanimous. Wade received life without parole in exchange for his testimony. But Clinton knew prison justice would likely be his real sentence. Child killers didn't survive long in general population. After the sentencing, Clinton stood outside the courthouse, facing a crowd of reporters. He'd avoided media attention throughout the trial, but now he had something to say. "My son Jimmy was 8 years old when his mother murdered him for money," he began, his voice carrying over the crowd. "He was brilliant, kind, and brave. In his final days, knowing he was going to die, He spent his time protecting me and gathering evidence to ensure his killers would be caught. The reporters pressed closer, cameras rolling. Andrea Garrett and Wade Knapp thought they were smart enough to commit the perfect crime. They thought they could murder a child and get away with it. They were wrong. "Mr. Garrett," a reporter called out, "do you feel justice has been served?" Clinton was quiet for a long moment. "Justice would be having my son back. What we have is accountability. Andrea Garrett will die for her crimes, and Wade Knapp will spend the rest of his life remembering what it cost him to murder an innocent child. Do you feel any sympathy for them?" Clinton's expression hardened. "I feel exactly as much sympathy for them as they felt for Jimmy when they killed him. None." As Clinton walked away from the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. "It's over, boss. You got them." But Clinton knew it wasn't over. It would never be over. Jimmy was still dead, and no amount of revenge could change that. Still, his son could rest knowing that his killers had paid the ultimate price for their evil. That would have to be enough. Chapter 9. The Final Reckoning. 2 years after the trial, Clinton stood in the observation room of the state prison, watching through bulletproof glass as Andrea Garrett was prepared for execution. She'd exhausted all her appeals, fired and hired multiple lawyers, and finally accepted that her death was inevitable. Clinton had been offered the chance to speak with Andrea before her execution. He declined. There was nothing she could say that would matter, and nothing he wanted to hear from her. Wade Knapp had been murdered in prison 18 months earlier, exactly as Clinton had predicted. A group of inmates had learned about his crimes and delivered their own form of justice. Clinton felt no satisfaction at the news. It was simply the natural consequence of Wade's choices. As the execution began, Clinton thought about Jimmy. His son would have been 10 years old now, probably playing Little League baseball or building elaborate constructions with his toy trucks. Instead, Jimmy existed only in memories and in the evidence that had brought his killers to justice. The warden approached Clinton as the process neared its end. "She asked if you had any final words for her," he said quietly. Clinton watched Andrea's still form through the glass. "Tell her Jimmy says hello." When it was over, Clinton drove to the cemetery where Jimmy was buried. The headstone was simple granite with an inscription that captured everything important. James Jimmy Garrett, beloved son, hero, protector. Clinton sat beside the grave as the sun set, finally allowing himself to feel something other than rage for the first time in 2 years. "It's done, buddy," he said quietly. "They can't hurt anyone else now." The wind rustled through the trees, and Clinton could almost imagine he heard Jimmy's voice. "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for keeping your promise." Clinton had kept many promises in his life, but this was the one that mattered most. Justice for Jimmy, accountability for his killers, and the certainty that their evil had been exposed and punished. He stayed at the cemetery until full darkness fell, talking to his son about construction projects and business deals, about the fishing trips they'd never take and the baseball games they'd never attend. When he finally left, Clinton felt something he hadn't experienced since Jimmy's death. Peace. Not happiness. That might never return completely. But peace in knowing that he'd honored his son's memory and ensured that Jimmy's sacrifice had not been in vain. The boy who died protecting his father had, in the end, protected countless other children by ensuring his killers could never harm again. That was Jimmy's real legacy, and it was enough. 3 months later, Clinton received a letter from a woman named Sally Chamberlain, whose daughter had been one of Andrea's victims at the daycare center. Sally thanked Clinton for never giving up, for pursuing justice when the police had failed her family years earlier. "Because of your son's courage and your determination," Sally wrote, "my daughter's death finally has meaning. Andrea can never hurt another child, and other families won't suffer what we've suffered." Clinton kept the letter in his desk drawer, along with dozens of others from families who'd found closure through Jimmy's case. His son's death had been a tragedy, but Jimmy's final act of courage had saved other children and brought peace to other parents. It wasn't the life Clinton had planned, but it was a purpose worth living for. Every morning, he visited Jimmy's grave before work. Every evening, he told his son about his day. And every night, he went to sleep knowing that justice had been served and evil had been punished. Jimmy Garrett was gone, But his legacy lived on in every child who would never meet Andrea Garrett, in every family that would never know that particular kind of evil. That was how a hero's story really ended. Not with revenge, but with redemption. Not with hatred, but with the knowledge that love had triumphed over evil, even in death. Clinton Garrett had kept his promise to his son, and in doing so, he discovered that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's ensuring they can never harm the innocent again. Jimmy would have been proud. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Dump. Troy Hutchinson gripped the steering wheel tighter as his phone buzzed against the dashboard. The construction site had been a nightmare today. Another delay. Another contractor tried to shortchange him. At 34, Troy had built his demolition company from nothing, and he'd learned that showing weakness invited vultures. "Daddy," Emma's voice crackled through the speaker, small and confused. "Hey, sweetheart, how's Grandma Helen's house?" Troy softened his voice, the way he only did for his 6-year-old daughter. She was the one pure thing in his increasingly complicated world. "Daddy, I'm scared. Grandma took me to a big place with lots of trash, and she made me eat old bread. It tasted bad and had green stuff on it." Troy's blood chilled. "What? Emma, where are you exactly?" "I don't know. There are big trucks and mountains of garbage. Grandma said we had to come here because—" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because they only have boys." The line went dead. Troy stared at his phone, his mind racing. Helen Marsh, his mother-in-law, had never been warm toward him, but taking Emma to a dump? Making her eat moldy bread? And what the hell did they only have boys mean? He speed-dialed his wife, Rebecca, straight to voicemail. 20 minutes later, Troy pulled into the driveway of the modest ranch house where Helen lived. His wife's BMW wasn't there. Emma came running out, her blonde hair disheveled, her Disney dress stained with something that smelled like rotting food. "Daddy!" She launched herself into his arms. Helen appeared in the doorway, her gray hair pulled back severely, her thin lips pressed into their perpetual frown. "You're early. Where's Rebecca?" Troy asked, not returning her greeting. "Working late. Again." Helen's tone carried an edge that made Troy's jaw clench. "Why did you take Emma to a dump?" Helen's eyes shifted. "I don't know what the child told you, but Mom made her eat rotten bread, Helen. At a dump." Troy's voice dropped to the dangerous quiet that his employees recognized as a warning. "Sometimes children need to learn that life isn't always pretty," Helen said, her chin raised defiantly. "The Marsh family has always understood sacrifice." "The Marsh family?" Troy repeated slowly. Rebecca had been a Castell before marriage. Helen had remarried after Rebecca's father died when she was young. Helen's face went pale. I just meant. "You meant what, Helen?" But she'd already retreated into the house, the door clicking shut with finality. Troy buckled Emma into her car seat, his mind churning. In the rearview mirror, he watched Helen's silhouette in the window, motionless as a sentinel. "Daddy, what does they only have boys mean?" Emma asked as they drove home. Troy met her eyes in the mirror. "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I'm going to find out." Chapter 2, Digging Deeper. The house felt different when Troy carried Emma inside. Too quiet, too clean. Rebecca's laptop was missing from the kitchen counter where she usually left it. Her favorite coffee mug, the one Emma had made her for Mother's Day, sat unused in the sink. Troy tucked Emma into bed with an extra story, then sat in his home office, staring at a framed photo on his desk. Rebecca at their wedding 7 years ago, radiant in white, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. Next to it, a smaller frame held Emma's first photo, tiny, red-faced, perfect. His phone buzzed. "Rebecca, sorry, big case. Working late at Miranda's. Don't wait up." Miranda Castell, Rebecca's sister. a successful therapist who'd never liked Troy, though she hid it better than Helen. Troy pulled out his laptop and began typing. Helen Marsh. The name fell foreign now. He'd known her as Helen Castell for the 6 years he'd dated Rebecca, then Helen Marsh for the year since she'd remarried that quiet widower, Frank. The search results were sparse. Frank Marsh had died 3 months ago. Troy remembered the funeral, remembered how Helen had seemed almost relieved rather than grieved. A small obituary mentioned Frank's previous marriage and children. Troy's finger hovered over the mouse. Frank Marsh had had 3 sons from his first marriage, all deceased. The oldest had died in Afghanistan. The other 2 in a car accident 5 years earlier. 3 sons, no daughters. Troy's breathing shallowed. He searched deeper, following genealogy sites and old newspaper articles. The Marsh family tree stretched back 4 generations in local records. Names and dates blurred together until a pattern emerged that made his stomach drop. Every Marsh male, for over a century, had produced only male children. Every single one. The phenomenon was so consistent that a local university had done a study in the 1980s, determining it was likely a genetic trait, possibly a chromosomal condition that prevented the conception or viability of female offspring. Troy's hands were shaking now. Emma was 6 years old. Emma was a girl. If Helen had really been thinking of Emma as part of the Marsh family line when she said they only have boys, then the front door opened. Rebecca's heels clicked across the hardwood. Troy, she called softly. You still up? He closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen. Rebecca stood by the refrigerator, still in her work clothes, a sharp navy suit that cost more than most people made in a week. Her law firm paid well, but not that well. How was Miranda's? He asked. Rebecca didn't meet his eyes. Fine. You know how she gets. Needed a vent about her ex. She poured herself a glass of wine. How was Emma? Interesting day. Your mother took her somewhere. Unusual. Rebecca's hand stilled on the wine glass. What do you mean? A dump, Rebecca. Helen took our 6-year-old daughter to eat moldy bread at a dump. That's ridiculous. Mom wouldn't. Emma called me, terrified. Said Helen told her they only have boys. Ring any bells? The color drained from Rebecca's face. I know. I don't know what she meant. Troy stepped closer. Don't you? Because I spent some time researching the Marsh family tonight. Fascinating genetics they have. Rebecca set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Troy, you're scaring me. Good, he said quietly. Because I'm starting to get scared too. Scared about what other lies I might uncover if I keep digging. Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and Troy caught a flash of panic in her eyes before she turned the screen away. I need a shower, she said, her voice strained. We can talk tomorrow. She hurried toward the stairs, but Troy caught her arm, gently but firmly. Rebecca. She turned, and for just a moment, he saw something in her face he'd never seen before. Guilt. Raw, desperate guilt. I love you, she whispered. I know, Troy replied. The question is, who else do you love? Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. Troy didn't sleep. He sat in his office until dawn, building a timeline that made his chest feel like it was caving in. Emma had been born 7 years and 2 months ago. Rebecca had gotten pregnant during their engagement, 3 months before the wedding, a happy surprise that had made them both giddy with joy. But now he remembered things differently. Rebecca's strange mood swings that spring, her sudden interest in yoga classes that seemed to happen at odd hours, the way she'd been protective of her phone, claiming work was getting more demanding. He also remembered the week she'd gone to visit her college roommate in Portland. Girl time, she called it. Just need to clear my head before we become a family. Emma had been born exactly 38 weeks after Rebecca returned from Portland. Troy's phone rang at 6 a.m. An unknown number. Mr. Hutchinson? This is Dr. Raymond Cross. I believe we need to talk. Who is this? I was Frank Marsh's physician. I think you might want to know some things about his family's medical history. Things that might affect your daughter. Troy's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of things? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour? Come alone. Dr. Cross was a thin man in his 60s with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly when he handed Troy a manila envelope. Frank was a good man, Cross said as they sat on a bench overlooking the river. But he carried guilt about something until the day he died. About Helen. About what she was hiding. Troy opened the envelope. Inside were medical records, genetic test results, and a handwritten letter. Frank found out 3 months before he died. Cross continued. Helen had confessed everything to him during one of his cancer treatments. The guilt was eating her alive, especially after Frank's sons died, and she realized what the genetic testing revealed. Troy read Frank's letter, written in a careful, shaking hand. To whoever finds this, my wife Helen made a terrible mistake 7 years ago. She helped her daughter deceive her husband about their child's paternity. The man Helen calls Curtis Brennan is the real father. I kept this secret because I love Helen, but I cannot die with this knowledge. The little girl deserves the truth, and the husband deserves justice. Helen planned to tell him the day Curtis comes back to town next month. She's been planning it for months, trying to find the courage. But I think the man deserves to know on his own terms. Frank Marsh. Troy's vision blurred. Curtis Brennan. The name hit him like a physical blow. Curtis had been Rebecca's law school study partner. He'd been at their wedding, charming, handsome, with an easy smile that had made Troy instinctively dislike him. Curtis had moved to Portland for work right after graduation, but he'd kept in touch with Rebecca. Always professional, always friendly. There's more, Dr. Cross said gently. Frank did some investigating before he died. Curtis is coming back to town permanently. He's bought a house 2 miles from yours. He's planning to start a practice here. Troy closed the envelope, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. Helen doesn't know Frank wrote this letter, Cross added. She thinks she still has time to decide how to tell you. How long have you been sitting on this? 2 weeks. Frank made me promise to wait until after his funeral arrangements were complete. He didn't want Helen to suffer more than necessary, even though... Cross trailed off. Even though she deserves to suffer, Troy finished. Cross looked uncomfortable. Frank loved her. He wanted mercy for her. Troy stood, the envelope clutched in his fist. Frank was a better man than me. That afternoon, Troy picked up Emma from school himself instead of letting Rebecca handle it. He studied his daughter's face as she chattered about her day. The shape of her nose, the color of her eyes, the way she gestured with her hands. He'd always thought she looked like Rebecca. Now he realized he'd been seeing what he wanted to see. Daddy, you look sad, Emma said as they sat in the ice cream shop where they'd gone every Friday since she was old enough to walk. Just thinking, sweetheart, about the bad bread at Grandma's house. Troy met her eyes. Emma, do you remember anything else Grandma said at that place? Emma scrunched her face in concentration. She said something about a man named Curtis. She said he was coming home soon and that everything would be different. Troy's spoon clattered against his bowl. Did I say something wrong? Emma asked, her voice small. Troy forced a smile. No, baby. You said everything exactly right. That night, Rebecca tried to initiate their usual Friday night routine. Wine, takeout, and a movie after Emma went to bed. But Troy couldn't focus on anything except the weight of the envelope hidden in his office safe. You've been weird all day, Rebecca said during the movie. Is this about what Mom did? Because I talked to her and... What did she say? Rebecca hesitated. She said she was trying to teach Emma about reality, about how hard life can be. By making her eat rotten food at a dump, she said Emma was being dramatic, that it was just stale bread and... Troy turned off the TV. Rebecca, I need you to tell me something. I need you to be completely honest. Her face went pale. Okay, is Emma my daughter? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Tears began streaming down her face. Troy, is she mine? Rebecca broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Troy felt something cold and final settle in his chest. How long have you been planning to leave me for him? Rebecca's head snapped up. What? No. Troy, I would never. Curtis is moving back to town, Rebecca. You think I'm stupid? Her face crumpled. It's not like that. I love you. I love our life. Curtis and I. What happened between us was a mistake, and it's over. A mistake that lasted how long? Just that week in Portland. It was just 1 week, and I regretted it immediately. I came home and I chose you. I chose us. Troy stood up slowly. You chose to lie to me for 7 years about my daughter's paternity. She is your daughter. Rebecca stood too, desperate. In every way that matters, she's yours. You raised her. You love her. Stop. Troy's voice was deadly quiet. Stop talking. Rebecca fell silent, tears streaming down her face. I want you to listen to me very carefully, Troy said. I've built my entire life around you and Emma. Everything I am, everything I've worked for was for my family. My family, Rebecca. And now I find out that my family is a lie. It's not a lie. Emma loves you. You're her father. No, Troy said. Curtis is her father. You made sure of that. He walked toward the stairs, then paused. I'm going to ask you one more question, and how you answer will determine what happens next. Rebecca wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. Okay, are you planning to tell Emma the truth? Are you and Curtis planning to be together? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Troy nodded slowly. I see. Troy, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... No, Troy said. We can't. Because I don't forgive betrayal, Rebecca. Ever. And I don't forget. He climbed the stairs, leaving his wife sobbing in their living room. In his office, he opened his laptop and began making plans. Troy Hutchinson had learned a long time ago that the construction business wasn't just about building things. Sometimes it was about tearing them down completely and starting over. Sometimes demolition was the only honest work left to do. Chapter 4. The Foundation. Troy's demolition company, Hutchinson Heavy Industries, occupied a sprawling yard on the outskirts of town, surrounded by chain-link fence and filled with the kinds of machinery that could level a building in hours. He'd started the business 8 years ago with a single excavator and a willingness to work jobs that other contractors wouldn't touch. Now, standing in his office trailer at dawn, Troy studied the framed newspaper clipping on his wall. Local man builds empire from ashes, the headline read. The article detailed how Troy had bought his first piece of equipment with money from a lawsuit settlement. Compensation for the childhood that had been stolen from him. His phone buzzed. Rebecca, Emma's asking for you. Please come home so we can talk. Troy deleted the message without responding. The truth was, Troy Hutchinson had been demolished before. At 12 years old, he'd watched his stepfather's fist destroy his mother's face for the last time. At 13, he'd testified in court against the man who'd called him son while breaking his ribs. At 14, he'd used the settlement money from the state to disappear into the foster system, choosing strangers over the mother who'd prioritized her boyfriend over her child's safety. He'd learned early that survival meant eliminating threats completely. Half measures got you hurt. A knock on his trailer door interrupted his thoughts. Miguel Santos, his foreman and closest friend, peered inside. Boss, you okay? You missed the Monday morning briefing. Miguel had worked for Troy for 6 years. He was one of the few people who knew about Troy's past, and one of the fewer who understood why Troy never forgave betrayal. Close the door, Troy said. Miguel stepped inside, his weathered face creased with concern. What's going on? Troy handed him Frank's letter. Miguel read it twice, his expression darkening with each word. Shit, boss. I'm sorry. I need your help with something. Miguel nodded without hesitation. Whatever you need. I want you to do some digging. Curtis Brennan. He's a lawyer, moved back from Portland. Find out everything. Where he's living, where he's working, who he's talking to. You want to follow him? I want you to learn him. His routines, his weaknesses, his secrets. Everything. Miguel was quiet for a moment. What about Rebecca? What about her? You gonna try to work things out? Troy met his friend's eyes. Miguel, if your wife had lied to you for 7 years about your kid's paternity and was planning to leave you for the real father, what would you do? Miguel's jaw tightened. I'd probably be in jail. Exactly. So I need to be smarter than that. Over the next week, Troy maintained a facade of normalcy while building his intelligence network. He went home each night, ate dinner with his family, helped Emma with homework, and slept in the guest room, ostensibly because of a work stress and insomnia that Rebecca didn't question too closely. Rebecca, meanwhile, grew increasingly nervous. She hovered around him, trying to gauge his mood, attempting casual conversations that felt forced and desperate. "I've been thinking about marriage counseling," she said one evening as Troy helped Emma with art project. "Have you?" Troy responded without looking up from Emma's drawing of their family. Stick figures holding hands in front of a house under a smiling sun. "Dr. Kellerman has openings next week. She's supposed to be excellent with trust issues." Troy finally looked at her. "Trust issues?" Rebecca flinched at his tone. "I just meant, I know I need to earn back your trust. I know it will take time." "How much time do you think it should take?" Troy asked. "To forgive 7 years of lies." Emma looked up from her drawing. "Are you and Mommy fighting?" "No, sweetheart," Troy said, his voice immediately softening. "We're just talking about grown-up stuff." But Emma wasn't fooled. Her 6-year-old's intuition picked up on the tension that had been building in the house. "Is it because of what Grandma said about the boys?" Rebecca went rigid. "Emma, honey, why don't you go watch TV? Daddy and I need to talk." Emma gathered her crayons reluctantly. "I don't like it when you're sad, Daddy." After Emma left, Rebecca turned to Troy with desperate eyes. "She doesn't know anything. She's just confused about what Mom said." "And what exactly did your mother say?" "I don't know. You know how Mom is. She says things that don't make sense when she's upset." Troy studied his wife's face. 7 years of marriage had taught him to read her tells. The way she touched her earring when she was nervous, the way her voice got higher when she was lying. Right now, she was doing both. "Rebecca, I'm going to give you one chance to tell me the truth about what your mother knows and what you and Curtis have planned." Rebecca's face crumpled. "There's nothing planned. Curtis and I haven't even talked since." "Since when?" "Since he called last month to say he was moving back." Troy felt something cold settle in his stomach. "He called you?" "It was just a courtesy call. He knew I still lived here, and he wanted it to avoid awkwardness." "What kind of awkwardness?" Rebecca was crying now. "Troy, please. I know I screwed up, but Emma is your daughter in every way that matters. I don't want to be with Curtis. I want to be with you." Troy stood up slowly. "The problem, Rebecca, is that I don't believe you, and I don't forgive liars." He left her sobbing at the kitchen table and went to his office, where he found 3 text messages from Miguel. Found his house, 414 Maple Street. Big place. He's working at Davidson and Associates. Started last week. "Boss, you need to see this." He's got photos on his social media. Recent ones. Troy called Miguel immediately. "What photos?" "Pictures of a little girl, boss. Blonde hair, looks about 6. Captions talk about my beautiful princess and can't wait to be together again." Troy's vision went red. "Send me the links." 5 minutes later, Troy was staring at Curtis Brennan's Facebook page. The man looked exactly the same, tall, athletic, with the kind of easy smile that made people trust him. But it was the photos that made Troy's hands shake with rage. Emma. Curtis had been posting pictures of Emma, clearly taken from a distance. Emma at the playground. Emma walking out of school. Emma at the ice cream shop where Troy took her every Friday. Curtis had been watching his daughter. The captions were worse. "Soon, princess. Daddy's coming home. My little girl is growing up so fast. Can't wait to make up for lost time. Home sweet home. Everything I've ever wanted is finally within reach." Troy's phone rang. Rebecca's number. "Troy, where are you?" "Emma's asking for you." "I'm at the office. Please come home. We need to talk about this like adults." Troy stared at the photos on his screen. "Rebecca, does Curtis know where Emma goes to school?" A long pause. "What? Does he know her schedule? Her routines?" "Troy, you're scaring me." "Why would he?" "Answer the question." I don't know. We haven't talked about Emma specifically. But you've talked." Another pause. "Once. Just once since he called." Troy closed his eyes. "When?" "Yesterday. He wanted to meet for coffee to clear the air. And I told him I couldn't. I told him I was married and happy, and that what happened between us was a mistake." "What did he say?" Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "He said mistakes could be corrected." Troy hung up and immediately called his lawyer, a bulldog named Patricia Wolf, who specialized in family law and didn't believe in mercy. "Pat, I need to see you tonight. Emergency. And bring everything you know about parental rights, custody law, and restraining orders." "Troy, what's happening?" "War," Troy said, "and I intend to win." Chapter 5. Setting the Trap. Patricia Wolf's law office smelled like leather and ambition. At 55, she'd built a reputation as the most ruthless family attorney in the county, a woman who could dismantle a marriage settlement with surgical precision and sleep soundly afterward. "This is a nightmare scenario," she said after Troy finished explaining the situation. "Legally speaking, if Curtis is Emma's biological father and can prove it, he has rights." "What kind of rights?" "Visitation, possibly shared custody, depending on how the court views his absence for the first 6 years of her life." Troy's jaw clenched. Even though he abandoned her, he can claim he didn't know she existed. Rebecca could back him up on that. Patricia leaned forward. "Troy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you planning to hurt this man?" "No," Troy said. "I'm planning to destroy him. Legally." Patricia relaxed slightly. "Good. Because if you touch him, you lose everything. Emma, the house, your business, everything. Then we do this by the book. We'll need DNA evidence, documentation of his stalking behavior, and proof that any relationship between Curtis and Rebecca would be detrimental to Emma's well-being." Patricia pulled out a legal pad. "I'll file for a restraining order based on the social media photos. That should buy us time." "How much time?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. "But Troy, if Curtis is smart, and lawyers usually are, he'll counter with a paternity suit. Once that DNA test comes back positive, the game changes." Troy was quiet for a long moment. "What if the DNA test never happens?" "What do you mean? What if Curtis disappears before he can file anything?" Patricia's eyes narrowed. "I can't be part of anything illegal." "I'm not talking about illegal. I'm talking about giving Curtis a reason to leave town voluntarily." "What kind of reason?" Troy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The kind of reason that makes staying more painful than leaving." The next morning, Troy put his plan into motion. First, he called Emma's school and had himself added as the only authorized pickup. Then he installed security cameras around his house and hired a private security firm to provide discreet protection. But the real work began with a phone call to an old friend. Danny Reeves answered on the first ring. "Troy, you son of a bitch. How long's it been?" 3 years. "I need a favor." Danny had been Troy's cellmate during a brief stint in juvenile detention 15 years earlier. Now he ran a reputation management firm that specialized in making problems disappear from the internet. His methods weren't always legal, but they were always effective. "What kind of favor?" "I need you to find everything there is to know about a lawyer named Curtis Brennan. And I mean everything. Credit history, employment records, medical records, traffic tickets, college transcripts, dating history. All of it. This going to cause me problems?" "Not if you're as good as you used to be." Danny laughed. "I'm better. Give me 48 hours. While Danny worked his magic, Troy focused on the psychological warfare. He had Miguel begin following Curtis openly, close enough to be noticed, far enough to avoid harassment charges. The message was clear: you're being watched. Then Troy started showing up places where Curtis would see him. The coffee shop near Curtis's office. The gym where Curtis worked out. The grocery store Curtis frequented. Always polite, always distant, but always present. Curtis got the message by the 3rd day. "I know what you're doing," Curtis said, cornering Troy in the parking lot outside the hardware store. Troy looked up from loading PVC pipe into his truck. "And what am I doing?" "Intimidating me. Following me. I'm running my business and living my life," Troy said calmly. "If our paths cross, that's just coincidence." Curtis stepped closer. "I know you know about Emma." "Emma's my daughter." "No," Curtis said, his voice hardening. "She's mine. And Rebecca and I are going to be together." Troy set down the pipe he was holding and turned to face Curtis fully. The two men were roughly the same height, but Troy had 40 pounds of muscle and a lifetime of control violence that showed in his posture. "Are you threatening my family?" Troy asked quietly. Curtis faltered slightly. "I'm just saying, because if you're threatening my family, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just telling you how things are going to be." Troy smiled. "Curtis, let me tell you how things are going to be. You're going to stay away from my wife, and you're going to stay away from my daughter. If you don't, I'm going to make your life very uncomfortable. You can't stop me from seeing my own child. Watch me." That evening, Danny called with his report. "Your boy Curtis has some interesting secrets," Danny said. Want the highlights? All of it. He's got gambling debts. Big ones. Lost about 60 grand in Vegas 6 months ago to some very unfriendly people. He's been making payments, but he's behind. Troy's pulse quickened. How far behind? 3 months. And these aren't the kind of people who send polite reminder notices. What else? Medical records show he's been treated for anxiety and depression. Currently on medication. Had a breakdown in Portland last year after a client sued him for malpractice. The malpractice case settled out of court, but it cost him his job and most of his savings. He's basically broke, Troy. This move back home, it's not a choice. It's desperation. Troy absorbed this information. Anything else? One more thing. Your wife's sister Miranda? She's been in contact with Curtis. Phone records show they've been talking regularly for the past 2 months. Troy felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. How regularly? 3-4 times a week. Long conversations. Send me everything, Troy said. And Danny, I need you to do one more thing. Name it. I need Curtis's Vegas creditors to know exactly where he is. Danny was quiet for a moment. Troy, those guys don't mess around. I'm not asking you to hurt him. I'm just asking you to share information. This could get ugly. It's already ugly, Troy said. I'm just evening the odds. After he hung up, Troy sat in his office, planning his next moves. Rebecca was playing a longer game than he'd realized, with Miranda as her ally and Curtis as her escape plan. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated him. Troy pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Rebecca's law firm. He'd only met her boss, Jonathan Davidson, a few times, but the man had struck him as someone who valued reputation above all else. Mr. Davidson? This is Troy Hutchinson, Rebecca's husband. I wonder if we could meet for coffee tomorrow. There's something you should know about your new associate. Troy hung up, then called Patricia. I need you to accelerate the restraining order filing, he said. And I need you to add Miranda to it. Miranda? On what grounds? Conspiracy to interfere with a marriage and facilitate stalking. Troy, that's a stretch. Pat, trust me. By tomorrow afternoon, you'll have all the evidence you need. The trap was set. Now all Troy had to do was wait for his enemies to walk into it. But first, he had one more phone call to make. Helen? It's Troy. We need to talk. Chapter 6, The Betrayer's Web. Helen's kitchen smelled like cigarettes and regret. She sat across from Troy at the same table where she'd served him Sunday dinners for 7 years, her hands shaking as she lit another menthol. You know, she said without preamble, I know everything. Helen took a long drag from her cigarette. Frank told you. Frank left me a letter before he died. He was a better man than any of you deserved. Tears started down Helen's weathered cheeks. He was. I killed him with the guilt, you know. The cancer might have taken his body, but I poisoned his soul. Tell me about Curtis. Helen stubbed out her cigarette and immediately lit another. Rebecca met him in law school. She was already engaged to you, but she was scared. Scared of what? Of settling down. Of becoming like me. Trapped in a small town with a man who worked with his hands while she had all these big dreams. Helen's voice was bitter. Curtis was everything she thought she wanted. Sophisticated. Ambitious. He made her feel special. So, she had an affair. 1 week. That's all it was supposed to be. She went to Portland to think about the engagement, and Curtis was there for some law conference. They spent the week together, and she came home pregnant. Troy felt his chest tighten. She knew it might not be mine. She hoped it was yours. She wanted it to be yours. But when Emma was born, Helen trailed off. When Emma was born, what? She looked like Curtis. Still does, if you know what to look for. Rebecca panicked. She made me promise never to tell. And I kept that promise because I thought it was for the best. For the best. Troy's voice was dangerously quiet. You loved that little girl from the moment she was born. You were a better father than Curtis ever could have been. Rebecca made the right choice. Rebecca made the choice to lie to me for 7 years. Helen met his eyes. Yes, she did, and I helped her do it. Why did you take Emma to the dump? Helen's face crumpled. Because Curtis is back, and Rebecca is losing her nerve. She's been talking about telling you the truth, about maybe trying to work out some kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Shared custody, with Curtis as the father and you as the stepfather. Helen's voice broke. I thought if Emma understood how hard life could be without security, without a stable home, she might help Rebecca see reason. Troy stared at this woman who'd eaten at his table, accepted his gifts, called him son. You were trying to terrorize a 6-year-old to protect your daughter's lies. I was trying to protect my granddaughter, Helen said. And you, by helping Rebecca plan to leave me? Helen's eyes widened. What? No, Rebecca doesn't want to leave you. She wants to find a way to tell you the truth without losing everything. Helen, Curtis has been stalking Emma. He's been posting photos of her online, calling her his daughter. Rebecca's been talking to him behind my back. And your other daughter, Miranda, has been helping coordinate it all. Helen went pale. That's not. Rebecca wouldn't. Troy pulled out his phone and showed her Curtis's social media posts. Helen's hands shook as she scrolled through the images. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, what have we done? You've given me a war, Troy said. And now I'm going to win it. Helen looked up at him, fear evident in her eyes. What are you going to do? I'm going to give Rebecca and Curtis exactly what they want. And then I'm going to watch them destroy each other trying to get it. Helen grabbed his arm. Troy, please. Emma doesn't deserve to be in the middle of this. Troy gently removed her hand. You should have thought of that 7 years ago. That afternoon, Troy met with Jonathan Davidson at an upscale coffee shop downtown. Davidson was a distinguished man in his 60s who'd built his law firm's reputation on discretion and ethics. Mr. Hutchinson, what can I do for you? Troy slid a folder across the table. I wanted to give you a heads up about Curtis Brennan before this becomes public. Davidson opened the folder and began reading. His expression grew darker with each page. Copies of Curtis's gambling debts, the malpractice suit, his medical records, and most damning, printed screenshots of his social media posts featuring Emma. Jesus Christ, Davidson muttered. Is this legitimate? Everything. Curtis has been stalking my 6-year-old daughter and posting photos of her online, claiming she's his child. He's also been having an inappropriate relationship with my wife. Davidson closed the folder. Mr. Hutchinson, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but this seems like a family matter. Mr. Davidson, Curtis is using your firm's resources to facilitate this stalking. He's been making personal calls on company time, using company computers to research my family, and representing himself to my daughter's school as a lawyer from your firm when he tried to get information about her schedule. Davidson's face went white. He what? He told the school's secretary he was representing a client in a custody case and needed to verify Emma's pickup schedule. She gave him the information because he said he was from Davidson and Associates. This was a lie, but Troy knew Davidson wouldn't verify it until after he'd acted on it. I want him gone, Davidson said. Today, I understand. I just wanted you to know before the restraining order becomes public and reporters start calling. Restraining order? Being filed this afternoon, along with a formal stalking complaint. Davidson stood up abruptly. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Curtis Brennan will no longer be associated with this firm. By 4 p.m., Curtis had been fired. By 5 p.m., Patricia had filed a restraining order. And by 6 p.m., Troy was home making dinner for Emma when Rebecca walked in, her face pale and shaken. We need to talk, she said. Emma's right here. Emma, go play in your room for a few minutes, Rebecca said, her voice strained. After Emma left, Rebecca turned to Troy with tears in her eyes. Curtis was fired today. Was he? That's unfortunate. You did this. I protected my daughter from a stalker. Rebecca slammed her hand on the counter. Damn it, Troy. You're destroying everything. I'm not destroying anything that wasn't already broken. Curtis is Emma's father. Troy stepped closer to his wife. No, Rebecca, I'm Emma's father. I've been her father for 6 years. Curtis is just the man who contributed genetic material. You can't just make this go away. Watch me. Rebecca's phone rang. She glanced at it and her face went white. It's Curtis. Don't answer it. She answered anyway. Curtis. Troy could hear the panic in Curtis's voice through the phone. Becca, we need to talk. Someone's been giving information to my creditors. They know where I am. Rebecca looked at Troy with growing horror. What creditors? The Vegas people. They're here, Rebecca. They want their money and they want it now. Rebecca ended the call and stared at Troy. You gave his location to loan sharks? I gave public information to interested parties. They could kill him. Then he should pay his debts. Rebecca backed away from him. I don't know who you are anymore. Troy smiled coldly. I'm exactly who I've always been, Rebecca. The only difference is now you get to see what happens to people who betray me. I want a divorce. No, Troy said calmly. You don't. Yes, I do. I want custody of Emma, and I want you out of our lives. Troy pulled out his phone and showed her a document. This is a petition for sole custody based on your unfitness as a mother. Mental instability, adultery, conspiracy to facilitate stalking, and child endangerment. Rebecca's face went white. You can't prove any of that. I can prove all of it. Your sister Miranda has been very helpful. Actually, phone records show she's been helping coordinate between you and Curtis for months. She's also been researching custody law and divorce attorneys on your behalf. Miranda wouldn't. Miranda's been recording your conversations, Rebecca. She's been building a case against me for months, documenting everything she thought would help you in a divorce. Unfortunately for you, those same recordings prove conspiracy and premeditation. Rebecca sank into a chair. This isn't happening. It's happening because you made it happen. You and Curtis and Miranda and your mother, you all decided to destroy my family. So now I'm going to destroy yours. Rebecca looked up at him with desperate eyes. What do you want? I want you to call Curtis and tell him it's over. I want you to cut all contact with him immediately. And I want you to convince Miranda to stay out of this. And if I do that, then we go to marriage counseling and we try to work this out like adults. What about Curtis? Troy's smile was sharp as a blade. Curtis is no longer your problem. Rebecca's phone rang again. This time it was Miranda. Don't answer it, Troy said. But Rebecca was already swiping to accept the call. Miranda? Miranda's voice was hysterical. Rebecca, someone broke in my office. They destroyed my computer, my files, everything. Rebecca looked at Troy with growing fear. Who would do that? I don't know. But whoever it was left a message. They said I should mind my own business and stop interfering in other people's marriages. Oh my God. Troy took the phone from Rebecca's hand. Hello, Miranda. Troy, what's going on? What's going on is that you've been conspiring against me for months. What's going on is that you've been recording my wife's private conversations. What's going on is that you're about to learn why smart people don't mess with my family. He hung up and handed the phone back to Rebecca. Now, Troy said calmly, let's discuss how this is going to work. Chapter 7, The Unraveling. Curtis Brennan was a broken man by Wednesday morning. Troy watched from across the street as Curtis loaded boxes into a battered Honda Civic, his movements frantic and desperate. The house Curtis had bought, the symbol of his triumphant return, now sported a for sale sign and a growing collection of legal notices taped to the front door. Troy's phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Vegas boys found him at 3 a.m. No violence, just made their point clear. He's got 48 hours to come up with $60K or they start taking collateral. Troy smiled grimly. Curtis didn't have $60,000. Curtis barely had $600 after his legal fees and the deposit he'd lost on the house he could no longer afford. But the money wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that Curtis had been so focused on his fantasy of playing house with Rebecca and Emma that he'd forgotten about the very real people who wanted to break his legs. Troy started his truck and drove to the office, where Patricia was waiting with a stack of legal documents. The restraining order was approved, she said without preamble. Curtis has to stay at least 500 feet away from you, Rebecca and Emma. He also can't contact any of you directly or through third parties. What about the custody petition? He can't file for paternity while the restraining order is active. But Troy, this is only temporary. Eventually, he'll be able to challenge it. He won't be around long enough to challenge anything. Patricia looked concerned. What does that mean? It means Curtis is about to discover that small-town life doesn't suit him after all. That afternoon, Troy drove to Emma's school for the parent-teacher conference he'd requested. Mrs. Peterson, Emma's first-grade teacher, was a kind woman in her 50s who genuinely cared about her students. Emma's been different this week, she said as they sat in the tiny plastic chairs. Quieter, More anxious. She keeps asking if you're going to come pick her up. There have been some changes at home, Troy said carefully. Nothing that affects Emma directly, but she's perceptive. Mr. Hutchinson, I need to tell you something. A man came by yesterday asking questions about Emma. He said he was a lawyer working on a custody case. Troy's blood chilled. What did you tell him? Nothing. We have strict policies about information sharing. But he seemed to know a lot about Emma already. Her schedule, her friends, her routines. Did he give you a name? Curtis Brennan. He said he was from Davidson and Associates. Troy pulled out his phone and showed Mrs. Peterson Curtis's photo. Is this him? Yes. Mr. Hutchinson, should I be concerned? He's not allowed on school property anymore. There's a restraining order in place. I'll have a copy sent to the office. Mrs. Peterson nodded gravely. Is Emma in danger? Troy considered the question. Curtis was desperate, broke, and facing violence from his creditors. Desperate people made bad decisions. I don't think so, but I'm taking precautions. That evening, Troy sat in his office reviewing the surveillance footage from his home security system. The cameras had captured several interesting visitors over the past week. Monday, Curtis driving slowly past the house 3 times. Tuesday, Miranda parking across the street for 2 hours, apparently waiting for Troy to leave. Wednesday, an unfamiliar car with Nevada plates, presumably Curtis's creditors. But Thursday's footage was the most revealing. Rebecca had left the house at 2 p.m., supposedly to run errands. Instead, she'd driven to a parking lot on the outskirts of town where she'd met Curtis for what appeared to be an intense conversation. The meeting lasted 30 minutes before Rebecca drove home alone. Curtis, meanwhile, had sat in his car for another hour, apparently making phone calls. Troy picked up his secure phone, the one Danny had given him years ago for conversations that needed to stay private. Danny, I need an update. Your boy Curtis is scrambling. He tried to borrow money from 3 different people today. No luck. What about his other options? That's where it gets interesting. Someone's been feeding him information about you. Financial records, business contracts, personal details. Troy's grip tightened on the phone. Who? Still working on that. But whoever it is has access to privileged information. Banking records, tax returns, even sealed court documents from your juvenile case. Troy felt a chill run down his spine. Only a few people had access to that level of personal information. Danny, I need you to check something for me. Has anyone been running background checks on me recently? Private investigators, law firms, that kind of thing. Give me 20 minutes. Troy hung up and walked to the kitchen, where Rebecca was helping Emma with her homework. They looked like the perfect family. Mother and daughter bent over a workbook, the evening light streaming through the windows. How was school today, sweetheart? Troy asked, kissing the top of Emma's head. Good. Mrs. Peterson said a man came to ask about me, but she didn't tell him anything because she doesn't talk to strangers. Rebecca went rigid. What man? Emma shrugged. I don't know. Some man. Troy met Rebecca's eyes across the table. She knew exactly what man. Emma, why don't you go watch TV for a few minutes? Mommy and Daddy need to talk. After Emma left, Rebecca turned to Troy with tears in her eyes. I didn't know he was going to the school, but you did know he was violating the restraining order when you met him today. Rebecca's face went white. How did you? I know everything, Rebecca. The question is, what else have you and Curtis been planning? Nothing. Troy, I swear, I told him it was over. I told him to leave town and never contact us again. And he said he couldn't leave. He said he owed money to dangerous people, and his only chance was to fight for custody of Emma. Troy felt something cold settle in his stomach. Custody of Emma for what? I don't know. He was talking crazy, saying he could get child support, or maybe he could get her away from here where it was safe. Safe from what? Rebecca was crying now. From you, Troy. He thinks you're going to hurt him. Troy's phone rang. Danny. Troy, you need to hear this. Someone's been digging into your background for 3 months. Deep digging. The kind that costs serious money. Who? A private investigation firm in Portland. Hired by a law firm called Miranda Castell, Ph.D., licensed clinical psychologist. The pieces clicked into place. Miranda wasn't just Rebecca's sister. She was a licensed psychologist who could testify about mental fitness in custody cases. She'd been building a psychological profile of Troy for months, documenting everything that could be used to paint him as unstable or dangerous. Danny, I need everything they found, and I need to know who else has access to it. Already on it. But Troy, there's more. The investigation firm also did a full workup on Emma. Medical records, school records, even genetic testing. Genetic testing? Someone submitted a hair sample 3 weeks ago. The results came back yesterday. Troy's vision tunneled. And Curtis Brennan is definitely Emma's biological father. Troy hung up and looked at Rebecca, who was watching him with growing terror. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Known what? How long have you known that Curtis had Emma's DNA tested? Rebecca broke down completely. I didn't know. Troy, I swear I didn't know. But Miranda knew. Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Troy stood up slowly, his mind racing through the implications. Miranda had been orchestrating this entire situation for months. She'd hired investigators, arranged for DNA testing, and probably coached Curtis on how to build a custody case. More importantly, she'd been preparing to have Troy declared mentally unfit to care for Emma. Troy pulled out his phone and called Patricia. Pat, I need an emergency hearing. Tomorrow, if possible. What's the emergency? I'm about to be framed for threatening behavior. I need to get ahead of it. Troy, what are you talking about? Miranda's been building a case against me for months. She's going to claim I'm unstable and dangerous, and she's got just enough evidence to make it stick. What kind of evidence? Troy looked at Rebecca, who was staring at him with something approaching terror. The kind that makes a jury believe I'm capable of violence, Troy said. And the worst part is they might be right. Chapter 8. The Hunters Become Prey. Friday morning brought Troy's first real crisis. He arrived at the office to find Miguel waiting with a grim expression and a legal document. Boss, this came by courier an hour ago. Troy read the emergency custody petition filed by Curtis Brennan and co-signed by Dr. Miranda Castell. The document painted Troy as a violent, unstable man who posed a clear and present danger to Emma's well-being. It included expert psychological evaluation based on extensive observation and analysis of Troy's behavior patterns. The petition requested immediate temporary custody pending a full hearing, citing credible threats of violence and documented stalking behavior against Curtis. They're moving fast, Patricia said when Troy called her. Emergency hearing is set for Monday morning. We have 3 days to prepare a response. What are our chances? Not good. Miranda's credentials give her testimony serious weight, and Curtis is playing the concerned biological father angle perfectly. Troy hung up and stared out his office window at the demolition site across the street. A crew was tearing down an old factory, reducing 50 years of someone's work to rubble in a matter of hours. Sometimes demolition was the only option. His secure phone buzzed. Danny, Troy, we've got problems. Curtis filed a police report this morning claiming you've been following him and making threats. What kind of threats? He says you cornered him at a gas station yesterday and told him you'd bury him if he didn't leave town. Troy frowned. I haven't been within a mile of Curtis since Monday. I know, but he's got a witness. Ooh, Rebecca. Troy felt the floor drop out from under him. What? She gave a statement to police this morning. Says she's concerned about your mental state and your fixation on Curtis. Says you've been talking about eliminating threats and protecting what's yours in ways that frightened her. Troy closed his eyes. Rebecca had played him perfectly. While he'd been focused on Curtis, she'd been building a case against him with her sister's help. Danny, I need you to check something. Has Rebecca been recording conversations at home? Give me an hour. Troy spent that hour thinking through everything Rebecca had said and done over the past week. Her attempts at reconciliation, her tears and apologies, her requests to talk about this like adults, all of it designed to get him to say something that could be used against him. His phone rang. Emma's school. Mr. Hutchinson? This is Principal Martinez. I'm afraid we have a situation. Troy's blood turned to ice. What kind of situation? Someone called in a bomb threat, specifically mentioning Emma. We've evacuated the building and called police, but given the restraining order situation, we thought you should know immediately. Where's Emma? Safe. She's with me in the emergency staging area. But Mr. Hutchinson, The caller specifically mentioned you by name. They said you were dangerous and that Emma wasn't safe at home. Troy was already moving toward his truck. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Mr. Hutchinson, wait. The police want to speak with you when you arrive. Troy paused. About what? They have some questions about the threats against Mr. Brennan. The trap was closing. Curtis and Rebecca had orchestrated this perfectly. A bomb threat to make Troy look unstable, followed by police questioning that would establish his presence at the school during a crisis. Troy called Patricia as he drove. They're framing me. For what? Everything. Bomb threats, stalking, mental instability. They want to make me look like a dangerous lunatic. Troy, don't go to the school. If police are waiting to question you, my daughter is there. Your daughter is safe. But if you walk into their trap, you'll lose her forever. Troy pulled over, his hands shaking with rage. What do you recommend? We go on the offensive. Immediately. How? By exposing what Curtis and Miranda have really been doing. And by proving that Rebecca has been lying about everything. Troy closed his eyes. Do it. Troy, this is going to get ugly. Really ugly. It's already ugly. That afternoon, Troy sat in Patricia's conference room as she laid out their counterattack. Danny had provided a wealth of information about Curtis's real activities, Miranda's unethical behavior, and Rebecca's coordination with both of them. Curtis has been using stolen credit cards to fund his investigation into your family, Patricia said. The private investigator he hired paid with a card belonging to one of his Portland clients. That's fraud. It gets better. Miranda has been secretly recording therapy sessions with Rebecca and using that information to build her case against you. That's a violation of professional ethics that could cost her license. And Rebecca? Patricia slid a folder across the table. Bank records show she's been funneling money to Curtis for months. Small amounts from your joint account, transferred to a PayPal account registered to a fake name. Troy reviewed the documents. How much? $12,000 over 6 months. Troy felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed him. She'd been systematically stealing from him to fund that betrayal. There's more, Patricia continued. The DNA test on Emma? Miranda arranged it by taking hair from Emma's brush during a sleepover at her house. No consent, no legal authority. That evidence is inadmissible. What about the bomb threat? Traced to a burner phone purchased with one of Curtis's stolen credit cards. We can prove he made the call. Troy looked up. You can prove all of this. Every bit of it. But Troy, if we use this information, we destroy all of them. Rebecca could face charges for theft and conspiracy. Miranda will lose her license and probably face criminal charges. Curtis is looking at multiple felonies. And Emma? Patricia's expression softened. Emma keeps the only father she's ever known. The man who raised her, protected her, and loved her unconditionally. Troy stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the first snow of winter was beginning to fall, covering the world in clean white. Do it, he said quietly. All of it. Troy turned back to Patricia. I told you at the beginning, I don't forgive betrayal. Ever. That evening, Troy sat in his empty house. Rebecca had taken Emma to her mother's for safety after the school incident. The silence was deafening. His phone rang. Miguel. Boss. Curtis's creditors found him again. This time, they weren't so polite. Is he alive? Barely. He's at the hospital with 3 broken ribs and a concussion. But Troy, he's talking, telling police everything about Rebecca and Miranda. Troy absorbed this information. He's trying to make a deal. Looks like it. Probably hoping cooperation will help with his legal problems. Let him talk. Everything he says just proves our case. Troy hung up and sat in his living room, surrounded by 7 years of memories. Photos of family vacations. Emma's artwork on the refrigerator. Rebecca's books on shelves. All of it built on lies. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Troy stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Yes, you did. You meant for all of it. Her response came immediately. Can we please just talk? For Emma's sake? Troy smiled grimly and typed. You'll have plenty of opportunity to talk. In court. Under oath. The next morning would bring the emergency custody hearing. But Troy was no longer worried about losing Emma. He He was looking forward to watching his enemies destroy each other in their desperation to escape the trap they'd built for themselves. Because Troy Hutchinson had learned a long time ago that the best revenge wasn't violence or destruction. The best revenge was letting your enemies hang themselves with a rope they'd made for you. Chapter 9. The Final Demolition. Monday morning's courtroom was packed with more spectators than Troy had expected. Word of the case had leaked, and the local media smelled blood in the water. A story involving lawyers, psychologists, custody fraud, and financial crimes was too juicy to ignore. Judge Margaret Foster was a stern woman in her 60s known for her zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics. She reviewed the emergency petition with obvious skepticism before looking up at Curtis's attorney. Mr. Bradley, your client is requesting emergency custody of a child he's had no relationship with for 6 years. You'd better have exceptional evidence. Curtis's lawyer, a nervous young man clearly out of his depth, stood shakily. Your Honor, we have documented evidence that the current custodial father poses a clear and present danger to the child. Present your evidence. For the next hour, Curtis's team laid out their case. Miranda testified about Troy's concerning behavioral patterns and documented threats of violence. Rebecca, looking pale and shaken, described her growing fear of her husband's obsession with revenge. Curtis himself took the stand, his face still showing bruises from his encounter with his creditors. He painted himself as a concerned father, trying to protect his biological daughter from an unstable man. I never knew Emma existed until recently. Curtis lied smoothly. When I discovered I had a daughter, I tried to approach the situation carefully, but Mr. Hutchinson became increasingly hostile and threatening. Judge Foster listened without expression. When Curtis's team finished, she turned to Patricia. Ms. Wolfe, your response? Patricia stood with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. Your Honor, this entire petition is based on fraud, theft, and perjury. I request permission to present evidence of criminal conspiracy. Objection. Bradley jumped up. This is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial. Overruled, Judge Foster said coldly. If there's evidence of fraud in this petition, I want to hear it. Patricia's presentation was devastating. Phone records showing months of coordination between Curtis, Rebecca, and Miranda. Bank records proving Rebecca had stolen money to fund Curtis's investigation. DNA evidence obtained illegally without parental consent. Your Honor, Patricia said, this isn't a custody case. It's an elaborate fraud designed to extort money and custody rights through illegal means. She presented the evidence of Curtis's stolen credit cards, his fraudulent identity theft, and his manufacture of evidence against Troy. The bomb threat that supposedly demonstrated Mr. Hutchinson's instability, made from a phone purchased with stolen funds by Mr. Brennan himself. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Curtis went white, his lawyer looking frantically through papers as if hoping to find some overlooked defense. But Patricia wasn't finished. Your Honor, I'd like to call Emma Hutchinson to testify. She's 6 years old, Bradley protested. Old enough to answer simple questions about who she considers her father. Judge Foster nodded. I'll allow it, but keep it brief and age-appropriate. Emma took the stand wearing her favorite dress, the blue one with the flowers that Troy had bought her for her birthday. She looked tiny in the witness chair, but her voice was clear when she spoke. Emma, Patricia said gently, who is your daddy? Emma pointed at Troy without hesitation. That's my daddy. Has anyone else ever told you they were your daddy? Emma shook her head. No, daddy is daddy. Do you feel safe with your daddy? Yes, daddy protects me. He reads me stories and makes me pancakes and helps me with my homework. Patricia smiled. Thank you, Emma. Curtis's lawyer declined to cross-examine a 6-year-old, probably the smartest decision he'd made all day. Judge Foster called a brief recess, during which Troy watched Curtis arguing frantically with his lawyer. Rebecca sat alone, tears streaming down her face. Miranda had disappeared entirely. When court reconvened, Judge Foster's expression was thunderous. In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant attempt to manipulate the legal system. Mr. Brennan, your petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into the criminal activities outlined by Ms. Wolfe. She turned to Rebecca. Mrs. Hutchinson, you will surrender your passport and remain available for questioning by law enforcement. Finally, she looked at Curtis. Mr. Brennan, you are hereby permanently enjoined from any contact with Emma Hutchinson. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Curtis stood shakily. Your Honor, I have rights as the biological father. Mr. Brennan, Judge Foster cut him off. You forfeited those rights when you chose fraud over fatherhood. Biological connection does not override the best interests of the child, and this child's best interests clearly lie with the man who has raised and loved her for 6 years. The gavel fell with finality. Outside the courthouse, Troy found Rebecca waiting by his truck. Her face was streaked with tears, her designer suit wrinkled from a sleepless night. Troy, please. We need to talk. No, we don't. I know you hate me. I know I deserve it. But Emma needs both her parents. Troy studied the woman he'd married 7 years ago. Emma has a parent. She has me. What about us? What about our marriage? What marriage, Rebecca? The one built on lies? The one where you stole money to fund your boyfriend's investigation into me? That marriage. Rebecca sobbed. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we can get through this. Troy shook his head. No, we can't. Because I don't forgive betrayal, Rebecca. I told you that from the beginning. So, what happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. The district attorney is filing charges for theft, conspiracy, and fraud. Miranda's going to lose her license and probably face jail time. Curtis is looking at federal charges for the credit card fraud. And me? Troy opened his truck door. You made your choice, Rebecca. You chose Curtis over me, lies over truth, and greed over family. Now you get to live with those choices. Rebecca grabbed his arm. What about Emma? She needs her mother. Troy gently removed her hand. Emma needs stability and truth. Two things you've never been able to provide. As Troy drove away, he saw Rebecca in his rearview mirror, standing alone in the courthouse parking lot, finally understanding the cost of her betrayal. That evening, Troy sat with Emma in their living room, helping her work on a puzzle. The house felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if the lies had been a physical presence that was finally gone. Daddy, is Mommy coming home? Emma asked. Troy considered his answer carefully. Mommy made some bad choices, sweetheart. She's going to have to go away for a while to think about what she did. Are you sad? Troy looked at his daughter, the little girl who had called him daddy from her first word, who ran to him when she was scared, who trusted him completely to keep her safe. No, baby, I'm not sad. I'm just glad you're here with me. Emma smiled and placed another puzzle piece. Me too, Daddy. 6 months later, Troy stood in the same courtroom for the final custody hearing. Rebecca was dressed in an orange jumpsuit, serving 18 months for theft and conspiracy. Curtis had fled the state to avoid federal charges, abandoning any pretense of caring about Emma. Miranda had lost her license and was facing her own criminal trial. Judge Foster reviewed the case one final time before making it official. Troy Hutchinson was granted sole legal and physical custody of Emma Hutchinson. Mr. Hutchinson, the judge said, "This little girl is lucky to have you." Troy looked down at Emma, who was coloring quietly in the gallery. "No, Your Honor.